Remember this gentleman? One meme of him sprinkling salt went viral, and as of the filming of this video, he is worth $60 billion. All because of sodium chloride. This one molecule changed Salt Bae's life. Salt can change our lives too. It affects our health, which is priceless. Regardless of ethnicity or gender, whether you have hypertension or not, too much salt can raise blood pressure high enough to cause damage. It leads to cardiovascular disease, which if you've watched my other videos, you'll know that it's the #1 killer in the world. In fact, people who add salt to their diets tend to not live as long as people who don't add it, or don't add it often. Look, there's a reason we love salt. It works with a lot of foods and covers up bad cooking skills, like mine. It makes other flavors more intense and even improves the texture of soup. And our bodies need salt to function, including maintaining normal blood pressure. But too much can be harmful. I'm Zane, a doctor who focuses on preventing disease naturally. And even those of us who don't season our foods with salt can get a lot of it in the foods that we eat. Later in the video, I'll go over 6 foods that the American Heart Association calls the Salty 6, which honestly sounds like the name of a half-dozen superheroes who are bitter about life. But first, let's answer some common questions and talk about some misconceptions about salt. What's the daily recommended salt intake? We add salt to our diet, but sodium is actually the element that we pay attention to when it comes to health. We get sodium in the form of sodium chloride, which is regular table salt. Experts recommend a maximum of 2.3 grams of sodium per day for most people, and as low as 1.5 grams a day for people who really need to minimize the negative effects of too much salt. But this is a general recommendation, and people have different requirements based on their particular health condition. So discuss your diet with a doctor or nutritionist before making major changes. So we get sodium mostly in the form of sodium chloride, and the 2.3 grams of sodium that's recommended per day is exactly what's in 1 teaspoon of table salt. So what the recommendations are really saying is don't have more than a teaspoon of salt per day. And if your doctor recommends it, you may need to stay under 2/3 of a teaspoon. It's probably more nuanced than that because there's early research that shows that some people might be more sensitive to sodium than others, but there's still not enough evidence to recommend specific salt levels for different groups of people. So you might be wondering if natural salts are healthier than table salt. Even natural salts or sea salt is sodium chloride, but some of them have a little bit of trace minerals like magnesium, for example. And all salt is gluten-free, so there's really no reason to say this on the packaging. The differences between different forms of salt are minimal, except for iodized salt. For decades, most Americans have been consuming salt with iodine added to prevent goiters that happen with low levels of thyroid hormone, which is an important driver of our metabolism and our health. But table salt is not just sodium, chloride, and other trace minerals. Most also have an anti-caking agent like calcium silicate, which keeps the salt as a fine powder that looks great in commercials. To me, your health is worth way more than $60 billion. So it's important to limit excess salt, and a lot of salt sneaks into our diet in the foods that we eat. So here are 6 foods that you might want to limit because they have a lot more salt than you might expect. So this first one might be a little surprising. It's hard to believe, right? Bread has salt? Yeah, it affects how the dough rises. There isn't really a whole lot of salt used in bread, but with how often we eat it, the salt really adds up. So in addition to cutting back on bread in general, check the nutrition labels. Sodium content can vary by the type of bread and the brand. Bread does contribute to the higher sodium content of sandwiches, but some of the highest sodium content can be found in fast food sandwiches and burgers. One sandwich can have over 100% of the daily recommended sodium, which we know isn't a lot, just 1 teaspoon. To blunt the damage that sandwiches can have on the body, instead of a whole sandwich, try pairing half a sandwich with a side salad instead. A lot of sandwiches contain this next food as well. 1 2-ounce serving or 6 thin slices of deli meat can contain as much as 1/3 of your daily recommended dietary sodium intake. This includes meats like sliced turkey, ham, roast beef, and pastrami. When making a sandwich, consider choosing low sodium versions of the meat and add a lot of fresh vegetables like lettuce, tomatoes, avocados, and bell peppers to get the nutrients that help counteract some of the effects of sodium on the heart and blood vessels. vegetables. Or instead of meat, look for healthier sources of protein. I talk more about this in one of my other videos that I'll link to. A slice of pepperoni pizza can contain almost a third of your daily recommended dietary sodium. Consider adding extra vegetables to your slice instead of having an extra slice. And thin crust pizza usually has less sodium, not to mention less carbs. If you're buying frozen pizza though, look closely at the nutrition facts. Check out the ingredient list too, because a lot of them are ultra processed and contain unnatural ingredients. We already know that sodium improves the texture of soup, helps preserve foods, and makes them taste better. So it's not surprising that 1 cup of canned soup can have more than a third of the daily recommended intake. So when buying soups, check the labels to find less salty versions. Tacos and burritos are some of my favorite foods, but ingredients like refried beans and cheese can cram in a lot of sodium. And taco seasonings can have a lot too, but there are low sodium versions. And you might want to avoid frozen burritos, which can have a ton of salt. And consider choosing burritos and tacos that are full of vegetables and lean sources of protein. These 6 foods are listed on a convenient handout from the American Heart Association. Other foods that might sneak sodium into your diet are chicken, cheese, like we talked about, and omelets. And not surprisingly, processed foods like these. They're part of an entire group of foods that are ultra processed and are actually responsible for a huge amount of people's salt intake. To learn more about how ultra processed foods affect the body, like what kind of artificial ingredients are in them and some healthy alternatives to them, check out this video over here. See you in the next one. Peace.